The opinions expressed are those of the host and guests of this program and are not necessarily those of station staff, management, or sponsors. WPSL does not endorse products that may be mentioned. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WPSL. It's time to Ask a Rabbi. Call in with your questions and comments at 340-1590. And now, here's your host, Rabbi Shafir Lobb.
Good morning. This is Rabbi Shafir Lobb of Congregation Eitz Chayim in Port St. Lucie, Florida. And it's a beautiful morning. When it's like this, I tell people this is the reward for being in Florida over the summer. You get to enjoy these kinds of weather. So it's a beautiful day. So thank you to everyone who's watching. I see folks coming on already and on the Facebook, and we're going to be on YouTube later, and we're right now on WPSL Digital 1590. So please do give me a call at 772-340-1590. And we're going to continue talking a little bit today about Passover, Pesach, and looking around at what's, a little bit of the history behind that holiday, because it's a holiday that's gone through a lot of changes. And every once in a while, I'll bump into somebody who'll say to me, well, the Last Supper, was a Seder. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why that's not possible. So that might be a good way to start the discussion. First of all,
I can see, though, how you could think that, yeah.
You might think that, if in fact it was Passover, Easter time, that the Last Supper occurs, then, but the point is that the book of John tries to have the crucifixion happening at the time when the lambs are slaughtered. It's really difficult to eat them the night before they're slaughtered. Okay, so just from a really practical point of view. Okay, so that's one. That's one reason. Another reason why it can't be is that Passover can never start on a Thursday night. That's a calendar impossibility. And the reason for that's very simple. You can't go from a holiday into Shabbat. Shabbat is the most important Jewish holiday. Judaism says that which happens most often is more important than that which only happens once a year. And Shabbat happens every week. So there's, 48 to 54 Shabbatot or Shabbats in a year. It depends on whether it's a leap year like it is this year. This year we have a leap year, and when there's a leap year in the Jewish calendar, it's an entire month. And that's because you can't slice a moon in half and have half a cycle. So you've either got to do a whole cycle or no cycle. And again, my little pet peeve is we don't have 365 days in a lunar year. We have some other number depending on how the phase of the moon goes and how many months, whether it's 12 or 13. So you can't have a holiday in front of Shabbat because you can't cook on the holiday for Shabbat. And you can't hold it over that long. You can cook for Shabbat and a holiday. So Pesach can and does, in fact, and it does this year, start on a Friday night. That's not a problem. Right? And then you can continue to cook food for the holiday on the holiday. You're not going to cook on Shabbat for the holiday, but you're going to cook other times. So it's a little bit problematic. It's a little difficult when Pesach starts on a Friday night because then you've got two Seders and you have to pre-cook the two meals for the two Seders. Either that or it's a very, very late dinner on the second night. And, but you can't start with Pesach and then have sitting food for Shabbat. The food for Shabbat needs to be fresh and cooked right before Shabbat. So that makes it so that the holidays have to come a certain time. You can start Pesach on a Saturday night, be Saturday and Sunday. It would be the two Seder nights. That works, and I've certainly had years where that's been the case. And and obviously it can be during the week, but it can't be on a Thursday. It can never be on a Thursday. There's a little sidebar that this is a funny story out of when I was in Tucson, and I had a couple of the Orthodox people come up to me with the Hebrew High. We had a joint. Everybody, all the rabbis taught the Hebrew High, and all the kids from all of Tucson came into this high school, and you had a variety of subjects. And a couple of the Orthodox came up to me and said, "You'll probably know the answer to this." And I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Why can Hanukkah never be on a Tuesday?" And I said, "It's because Pesach can never be on a Thursday." And so when you've got certain restrictions in the calendar, it carries through to other holidays. So Hanukkah can never start on a Tuesday. There's your trivia question that you can use on some little trivia contest somewhere.
Are there any T-shirts that say that?
Probably not, but it was an interesting discussion, and it's what I got a tickle out of it, because all you have to do is really understand the calendar to understand that. And it has to do with Talmud's discussion about when there is and isn't a leap year. In the old days, a couple thousand years ago, back when a new moon was called by looking up at the moon, they would decide in the moment or at that time if it would be a leap year or not. And it was based on a bunch of things. One was whether or not the barley was sprouting, because the wild barley that grows in and around Jerusalem, then that tells you it's the month of Aviv, the month of the barley sprout, right? or spring. That's the other translation for that. And then it also says, but before you declare the leap year, take a look at how the year lays out and make sure it makes no impossible holidays. Right? So, the rabbis had
So you have two things to determine that,
right,
the barley and what day of the week the holiday will fall?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So they automatically know by laying out the calendar, if they do the leap month, what it's going to do. And so they can decide in the moment whether to declare a leap month or not. And it's kind of interesting. We don't tend to think of the ancients as being that in tune with all of that, but they clearly were, because there's a great big discussion in Talmud about that exact subject. So it's kind of, the calendar has been around for a while, not as many years as you like to think, and not all the days that you like to think.
Are there any other holidays that can't be on certain days?
Yom Kippur, is not going to be on a Sunday.
Why?
Same kind of reasons, because of how you have to cook to do the breakfast and all that. Okay, so it's going to work, it can't be on a Thursday either, rather, right? Because you can't break fast on Shabbat. You can't overrun Yom Kippur to get into Shabbat. Yeah, mostly it's food that determines these kinds of things, because food was a major production. Today we could argue and we could say, well, you have the food ready and you shove it into the microwave and boom, it's done, right? And you don't have to really cook it. But in the old days, you had to slaughter the animal and roast it and etc. So it was a lot more production to make dinner. You didn't just run out to the McDonald's and get a hamburger.
And I'm sure there were rules as to what you can eat when, and because of its availability.
Right. They didn't have roller vehicles like we do today. They didn't have engine-driven roller vehicles, right? They might have had carts that were pulled by donkeys or horses, or even camels or whatever. But I'm not sure that a camel is willing to pull something. It's willing to carry something. I don't think it's willing to pull something. All these things we got to think about with animals. And so that had an effect on things. And, the idea was that if you were going to slaughter an animal for food, you needed to have a situation where people were going to eat that meat. And not leave it over, because you didn't have a fridge.
No, you weren't throwing it in the freezer. Yeah,
you couldn't do that.
Bag.
Right. And Judaism, in fact, very specifically criticizes about something that people did do for a long time, which was that you would eat an animal piecemeal. And by that, what I mean is you would cut off its leg, amputate it, roast that leg, and then later on go and do another piece of the animal. And the animal would suffer until you had eaten enough of it that it would die, because they didn't have refrigeration. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sitting here like horrified.
Well, but that was a common practice, for example, when they would...
But how did you keep it
alive?
Yeah.
Well, you did a tourniquet when you
okay.
Yeah. And I'm not going to say the animal, I'm sure the animal was in a great deal of pain. And you then had to carry the animal. It couldn't walk itself.
Mm-hmm.
But that was part of how, when you drove a herd of cattle, because, a couple of cowboys are not going to eat an entire cow.
Mm-hmm. I thought they ate beans.
I think they
That's
ate
how
more
they-
than beans.
yeah.
So, but Judaism says that that's very cruel because the animal's suffering that whole time, and not that there isn't, and the idea, yes, losing your life is not fun by any stretch of the imagination, but the idea is to make that as painless as possible, and to acknowledge that something is giving up its life so that you can have its protein for you, and just to not be unusually cruel to the animal. So, yeah. So some of those things that we do in ancient times are very much rooted in those kinds of concerns. The thing about meat and milk, right, which is don't see the kid in its mother's milk. In other words, don't throw a live baby kid into boiling milk from its mother. That's not a nice way to go. It's not a pleasant way to slaughter an animal. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure along the way they tried different things. They had to figure out what was best, and then someone said that this is just wrong. We can't be doing this.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And people over time, just learned how to get better and better at reducing the pain of the animal.
So is it only culturally then that I think of milk and meat and I get disgusted?
That's because you're
Yeah, I can't put the two together either. Not
cheeseburger.
really. And milk.
Well, okay, that's not
Never.
milk.
Oh, you mean cheese?
Cheese is not
Oh,
milk.
see,
No, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, yes, but I can't have a glass of milk with meat. It's just impossible.
See, I can't even do mayonnaise on meat. I can't bring those two together. It's like, to me it's creamy and it's cold, and milk is creamy and cold, and I can't put the
You
two
guys
together.
have really taken a little bit of an extension on it.
You want to talk about an extension very briefly?
Okay.
When I was a kid, and we'd have a regular family meal, and we'd have guests over. At the end of the meal, my parents would always make coffee.
Yeah.
And I'd ask, they'd bring out cake and they'd have coffee. And I said, can I have a glass of milk? No, you just had meat. So when I got a little bit older, I said, well, wait a second. You're having coffee with milk in it. That's different.
Yeah, but you were having cake. Milk goes with cake really well.
You were right to question it because an Orthodox kosher home would not have milk in the coffee. They might have coffee afterwards, but in fact, in some Orthodox homes, it won't even be the non-dairy creamer. The plastic that we pretend is cream, because of the meat and milk issue. So your parents are already maneuvering, for lack of a better word, and you were right. There's not a whole lot of difference between the milk and the coffee, and the milk and the glass with the cake.
I will play that one day for my mother.
Okay, but she's probably who knows, and we do pick up things like that, right? The meat milk that's a rabbinic instruction. It's not a Torah instruction. The Torah instruction is don't see the kid in its mother's milk. There's a great meme out on the internet about that. About I want a cheeseburger. You shall not see the kid in its mother's milk. Well, I really like cheeseburgers. You shall not see the kid in its mother. Dang it, no cheeseburgers. 'Cause cheese is milk. Cheese is milk, unless you're getting a vegan cheese. And then it's not. And then,
But you're not really cooking them together. You're adding it on top. Someone else already made the cheese somewhere else, and I guess you could explain it away.
you might be able to, and you certainly would get around it if you were, say, having a beef cheeseburger with goat cheese, right? Because then it can't be its mother's milk.
Okay.
And the other one that I love about it, and this, Sephardi have a different look, and for a long time they considered chicken to be not meat because it's not a mammal, and but in Europe, chicken was. The argument was that if you sent your servant to the market to go buy meat, and they didn't have beef or lamb, he would come home with chicken because it was the closest. Wouldn't come home with fish. Would come home and say they didn't have any. Because fish was different enough. Chicken was close enough that, they'd try to slide it, or turkey. And so the Ashkenaz rabbi said, no chicken, because if a non-Jew's looking in, they won't know that that it's chicken and not meat, and they'll think that you're not observing. Marat ayin, the evil eye. Right? It shouldn't look bad. And and I love it because one of my friends, an Israeli friend of mine, when her son used to get mad, he used to say, "Well, I'm going to go have cheese on my chicken." And my Israeli friend would say to him, "Is that the mother? Go find me some chicken milk, milk from a chicken." Because it's not a big.
No.
It wasn't a big deal to her because she was Sephardi. It was a mixed family, Sephardi Ashkenaz, and so she used to tease him all the time, the son, for getting angry with the father and then going eating not a cheeseburger but a chicken with cheese kind of food. And so some of that is it's interpretation, and Talmud again talks about it, and the rabbis overhear a couple of women talking about making a stew with milk, for some kind of a stroganoff probably kind of dish, and they become horrified. They become, oh my gosh, it is possible that if you're having lamb, you could be seething the kid in its mother's milk. Because, whose milk are you going to use to cook the meat? And so they became afraid that somebody might accidentally violate that instruction. And so they restricted it. And it's worth noting, you were required to have 2 sets of dishes with glazed dishes. Glazed dishes are not porous. There's no way for meat or milk to stick unless you got a crack, and that's a whole different issue. But glazed dishes are not porous. Right? Glass, you don't have to have 2 sets of dishes. It's actually what I did when I lived in Israel, because we knew we'd only be there for a year, so we bought glass dishes, enough for us to use, and that way we functioned on 1 set of dishes.
Why didn't you have to have 2 sets of utensils?
Because stainless steel is not really porous either, but because same reason that you do glazed dishes. 2 sets of dishes. Ceramics, porcelain, it's not porous. But what Akiva said was that it is difficult Hillel rather, it is difficult for the poor to buy glazed dishes. Why should they have the burden of having to have 2 dishes and the rich not? And so he said, everybody should have 2 sets of dishes, including, the Ballad of Irving, right? He had 2 sets of dishes out on the range. It's a really funny song, The Ballad of Irving. It talks about him being kosher out on the 132nd fastest gun in the West. The Ballad of Irving. Lauren Green does a great job on that. So we've got all these habits that have grown up over time. And, the meat milk one is an interesting one. It's become very tenacious. Right? People may give up all kinds of other things of the observance of kashrut, of dietary, and they'll still keep that meat milk thing because it's a gut thing, like you said. And, you've got to decide and pick and choose. It's the only thing I can say. We see more and more people eating out, right, in a kosher home, but they eat out. Well, the point is not your house. The point is your body. Right?
Or your practices,
or
what
your
what you practice, yeah.
But, and I'll temper that by saying, I understand it's difficult. It's difficult in, for example, Port St. Lucie. In Boca, you can go to, I'm forgetting the name of that kosher, Ben's. Right, Ben's Kosher Deli, and eat there, but there aren't that many kosher restaurants in Port St. Lucie. There were a couple of vegan restaurants in Tucson, and I'll even share that a couple of my colleagues there looked at the vegan restaurant and didn't put a hechsher on it, saying the ingredients are kosher, but the other part that you need to do to be kosher is you need to be closed on Shabbos, right? Because you can't prepare kosher food on Shabbat. So if you're going to cook it, you're already, there's a whole nother layer It's much more complex than people begin to think. It's not just about meat and milk and about whether or not there's an OU or a star K on the container or any of the other many kosher symbols that have cropped up over the years. Those are certainly a help and an indication and a start, but it's not the whole story. So there's much more to it. What does kosher mean? Kosher comes from kasher, meaning ritually fit. So it's a meal that's properly prepared for a community, and the idea being that in that community you have all different levels of observance and rigorousness, and you don't know where somebody is, so you've got to be able to serve to some common denominator that's going to work for everyone. And so you need to be really conscious of who's in your community. And is there somebody who's vegan? Is there somebody who's strict on their kashrut? So you can be mindful of those questions and deal accordingly.
So what's supposed to happen then if you accidentally mix up the plates or the utensils?
That's when you start planting them in the garden.
That's real. That's not like
no,
that's not like a poo-poo old wives' tale.
That's not a Bubba Meissen. No, that's
my grandmother used to go nuts in Montreal if I used the wrong knife for cream cheese. Oh yeah, the earth was coming to an end.
No,
and she'd bury it.
Well, because you messed up her silverware for a period of time. I can see where she'd be upset. You weren't mindful. You just reached in the drawer and grabbed.
Right.
And you should have asked. And had your home been kosher, you would have asked, because you would have been in the habit.
Can you use plastic?
You can use plastic. Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
One time use, throw it away. Then it doesn't matter then?
Oh, then you've got a whole nother issue.
Okay.
But no, you can. Yeah. And paper plates and things like that are very common. I can, out of my distant past, I can remember my grandmother of blessed memory coming to our house, and she would come with paper plates and I can remember a really long discussion with her and my father at the table, with him saying, a dishwasher cleans the dishes clean. You don't have to worry. You can eat on these plates. And eventually she did. But it took him a while to convince her that it was okay to use the dishwasher to wash the dishes. And because for the longest time that just drove her up a tree. And she's old school. She's old school.
But you really do have to bury it.
Well, you've got to let it sit for a good while. Yeah, you let the meat or milk decompose. That's the word I'm looking for. And go into the ground, and then you re-mikveh it and bring it back. So it's a big deal. You made her life much more difficult.
So it was more complicated than putting the laundry out on the line for everybody to see.
Yeah. You were making her life miserable, and if somebody else had done it recently, she was probably a little bit short on forks or spoons or knives or something. You weren't helping the situation. Yeah, and this is the time of year. So I use plastic for seders. We use the plastic for the community seder, but I can remember my mother getting out and I've got those dishes, right? Service for 32 in fine china, and because she was prepared for the seder. The dairy was not, it was either 12 or 16, but 32 for the meat dishes, and then they're stacked high in the beautiful break front. And I don't use them because they're Pesach thick and they're gorgeous, and yeah. So I don't use them. Because we don't entertain in the house like my mother used to. That's different. With the way that Eitz Chayim does Seder, we do two nights of Seder. We'll be doing Friday night and Saturday night. And there'll be plastic, both of them. No, nice plastic. We're going out of our way and doing the pretty plastic, so it doesn't, it's not cheap. But, it'll be classy. But you're right, it's single use in the
Be very classy. There'll be a waterfall and everything.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we're going to be, it's going to be at Stuart's home, and he's got this spa swimming pool in the back, so if anybody wants to see his spa, you can come to the Seder.
So trickling water.
Yeah.
I'll even put the pool light show on.
There you go.
Aye. Yeah, so in a funny kind of way, you're just now reminding me of, we did in Ohio, the rabbi that I studied with, we did Shabbat on the rail or something like that. It was a train ride. Yeah, it was something a little different.
Yeah.
And somebody had this idea that we'd do Shabbat morning on a train ride up to Akron and back to Canton. And it was the same time as the service would have been, and it was done as a congregational thing. And I discovered that as you're going through parks with geese and in lakes and things, people are not really paying attention to Torah study.
Mm-hmm.
So it was impossible to compete with that. So what can I say? It was a great idea, Rabbi John, but it didn't work. We only did it that once. So that's back when I was a student rabbi.
But something you will never forget.
Something I will never forget. And, small world, right? So one of the people that was on that train ride came and visited with me. Some people who had been studying. I used to do a Torah study on a conference line back in the old days when that was the big thing. And I hadn't really known those people, but they came up. They lived in Maryland, and they came up to Ohio, where I was on a vacation, and it just happened to coincide with this Shabbat on the rails, and so they came with us on that. And the sister of the woman who was on the train lives in Port St. Lucie. Wow. And the husband is a little bit further south. Mm-hmm. She has since passed, but small world. Yeah, you never imagine these kinds of things. The Jewish community is fairly tight. So everybody knows everybody, and everybody's related to everybody. We're just that way. Small community. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if anybody'd like to give me a call on any of these variety of things that we've talked about, or anything else that you'd like to ask a rabbi, please give me a call at 772-340-1590. I won't threaten to sing like somebody else did this morning.
It worked.
I heard that.
Well, when you use all the notes, right?
All at one time, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, the standard joke in our family is, what key did you sing that in? All of them. Yeah, and I will tell you that our cantorial soloist is one of our cantorial soloists, the one for the High Holidays, is watching. Hi, Cher. She doesn't use all the notes at one time. She's got a much better control of her voice than I do. So that's a code. So we started out by saying that it can't be the Last Supper. And I think people need to recognize that you can't, so you've got two big reasons why it can't be the last. Now, did they have some kind of a supper and a meal? Of course they did. I don't know what it was. It's perfectly reasonable that a group that size is going to have a meal. So that's not a surprise. It just wasn't a Seder. The third reason why it can't be a Seder is because the Seder as we have it today did not exist.
Okay, well that's like the clincher, isn't it? I
mean,
that's
like
really.
There's
how do you dispute that?
There's three really big reasons. Well, most people don't realize that. A lot of people think of the Seder as something that has been around since forever, but in fact, it wasn't created until after the temple was destroyed, and we no longer slaughtered lambs at Pesach. And at that point, the rabbis looked around and actually changed the observance of the Passover and changed the meal to the Seder. And I understand that did work. So, Paul, thank you for calling. What's your question, Paul?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I have a neighbor, and they're Jewish, and they had invited us over for dinner one time, and she had a little, like a china cabinet, and inside there was a clear crystal glass piece. It looked like a top that somebody would spin, and it had some, I guess, Hebrew writing on it, or Jewish writing.
Four letters, yeah, 4 Hebrew letters.
Yeah, and I was just wondering, because I have to hang up, but I'll listen to your answer. I was just wondering what the significance was that? And thank you.
Okay, so what that object was that was clear and looked like a spin, that you top, a top that you spin, is that that's exactly what it is. It's called a dreidel. It's a four-sided top, and it has 4 letters on it. And the 4 letters will either say, stand for a great miracle happened there, which is most common here in the U.S., because there is Israel. And you also might have a great miracle happened here if it's an Israeli one, because for them it's here. So that's what that is. It's a dreidel for Hanukkah, and since it was a beautiful crystal version thereof is why it was in the showcase. Probably never used for Hanukkah because you kind of get rough with those things. So the question was, what was a clear crystal thing that looked like a top in his neighbor's outbreak front?
With letters on it.
With letters on it, and it would be a dreidel. Okay, and we also have Robert on the line. Thank you, Robert. What's your question?
I just wanted to ask, I wasn't born and raised Jewish, but is it okay for people that want to come down to learn and experience it to come down?
Absolutely.
That aren't Jewish?
Absolutely. So Robert's asking the question, if he wasn't born or raised Jewish, can he participate in things? You are absolutely welcome to come and come and see what the community's all about. You're welcome to join with us as we praise God and have we make a joyful noise unto the Lord, I like to say. I wish I could say it was beautiful singing. Most of the time it's quite nice. It depends if it's me or Stuart. If you hear Stuart in the congregation, it might not be quite so melodious.
He's a cool guy, though.
Yeah, he is a cool guy. I'm just teasing him because he's sitting right here. But yes, anybody who's not Jewish is welcome at any time to come and sit in a service. And you know, our services are somewhat relaxed. And you know, if we don't answer your question during the service, we'll certainly answer it afterward. There's a gathering called Oneg Shabbat, which means rejoicing in the Shabbat, rejoicing in the Sabbath. And for us, that means sitting for, I don't know, an hour and a half sometimes, and just schmoozing, and we'll answer questions and do all kinds of things. And eating, yes. There's definitely an eating part of that. Usually quite good.
It sounds interesting. I definitely would like to come down and experience it.
Well, you are absolutely welcome to come down. It's 540 Northwest University Boulevard, and it's Suite 102. Yeah, Friday nights at 7:30 and Shabbat mornings we do something called Stolen Moments, which is text study, and that's at 9:30, and then the service is at 10:30.
Can I say something about that?
Sure.
We do have lots of people that come and visit, especially your students. Mm-hmm. And one of the things about Judaism is we don't seek to convert people.
Right.
People, if people want to learn a little bit more, experience what it's like, you know, we're happy to have them. We're not going to try to convert anybody. We even have occasionally classes on, you know, a taste of Judaism,
I was thinking about the taste of Judaism.
You know, it's not really for the Jewish people. It's really for, you know, non-Jews who just want to figure out what the heck is this all about, because, you know, our sort of premise from the very beginning is the more we all know about each other, and the rabbis on the Interfaith Alliance, the Treasure Coast, the more we all know about each other, the more we're likely to get along.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, last I checked, we were all human.
Yes. It sounds great, and I'll meet you down there.
Okay, that sounds great, Robert. I'd enjoy that greatly. You're always welcome. So please do. Again, Friday night services 7:30, and Shabbat morning 9:30 for Stolen Moments or Torah study, and 10:30 for the service. And you know, check our website, www.eitzchayim.org, or the Facebook page. Look for Congregation Eitz Chayim, Port St. Lucie, and you'll see our schedule. You'll see the events coming up. There's all kinds of exciting things. Passover and the Seder is the next big thing, and then of course that'll have a Yizkor the week after that. So
you should tell Passover we throw things at people.
He likes we do things for the plagues.
Okay.
So
thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you. And thank you for calling in, Robert. Appreciate that. Anybody else like to ask a rabbi a question here at 772-340-1590 on Digital PSL? Your talk of the Treasure Coast. And maybe you'd like to ask a rabbi a question. She'd certainly be more than willing to answer them. I see on your iPad over there that I'm like drifting off and on the screen. I guess I have it a little too close. All right. That's what it is. You'll get a better view on
it's not a very
YouTube.
wide counter.
No, it's not it's not a very wide camera on the I should push it back further. I'll remember that next week. I don't want to jar it and have it decide that it doesn't want to transmit, because technology is wonderful when it works. So, okay, back to so the Seder actually changes about a little over 1900 years ago, when the temple is destroyed. When the Romans destroy the temple, the practice of the lambing festival, part of Pesach, ends. And a lot of people don't even have, Sephardi will often have lamb for the meal to remember, when it was done. And Ashkenaz, not so much. Tend to have brisket and chicken or turkey. And particularly if you're American, turkey is popular because it's a great big bird that's on sale around that. Yeah.
That's amazing how that works out, right?
It works out
Back
really
to that
well.
marketing again.
Yeah, and the turducken or whatever. But yeah, all the different kinds of things that people eat. And so when the temple was destroyed, the rabbis looked around and said, what are we going to do? How are we going to perpetuate this ritual that was so centered in the temple and shift it around? And so they looked at the Roman Symposium and used the part of it that's the questions and the asking and the evening of talking and discussing. And they also looked at the Zoroastrian practice of Nowruz, of the Spring Festival. In fact, if you Google Nowruz, Spring Festival, Zoroastrian, you will see a tray that looks amazingly like a Seder plate. It's got all the spring vegetables on it because it's their celebration of spring. And so the rabbis took these two fairly different traditions, blended them, and, kind of like made them intrinsically Jewish and recreated the holiday. And that's, kind of stuck. People do a Seder. It's one of the last things to fall away when people start to leave their Jewish practice behind. The Seder is usually the last item that they'll leave. So it's huge. It's a real family gathering, and it's a time for even singles will find a way of getting together. And that's actually how I started doing the first night Seder. Most communities will do a second night Seder on the theory that first night you're in somebody's home. And when I first moved to Tucson, there were a couple of people who said, I don't really have a place to go. Rabbi, do you know where we can go? Da-da-da-da-da-da. And in that first year, I don't remember if Bill came in just right before the holiday or what it was. I don't think he was there the very first year. And I just said, hey, let's get together at my place and we'll just do a Seder here. And we did that. And then the following year, we did the same thing when Bill was there, because it took Bill a while to get to Tucson. And, we had some huge number of people, I think 27 people in my living room, which felt, like a mob. And I can remember somebody saying, we need to wash these plastic dishes and make them not single use. And Bill looking at them and saying, the rabbi is not washing dishes tonight. So it's one of the times when he stood up for me and, collected it in a trash bag, and out it went, which I was not the least bit opposed to, because after having conducted the Seder, I was not going to go stand at a sink and wash plastic dishes. Even if I was going to put them in a dishwasher, it was not going to happen. So, yeah. And after that, then we said, 27, that's just not really manageable in the house, not to mention which is kind of hard to fit a table in. We had a nice great room, but it was a little crowded. And so we moved it to the temple. And ever since then, I've offered a first night and a second night. And they're usually both fairly well attended. I guess you'll be at both this year.
I guess I will be at both.
Don't have much choice.
You have a lot of matzah pizza?
We'll make matzah pizza. Yeah, I make matzah pizza for him.
It's fun to say, too.
Yeah.
Say it 10 times fast.
Well, the funny thing about that is now you can get little kits, right, that made with triangular matzah, because the idea of matzah pizza has apparently caught on. I guess that would be fusion, right? That would be Italian Jewish.
That was just 2 weeks
Italian
ago. I made
Jews.
matzah brie.
I saw that. You know, you're supposed to stop eating matzah as you get closer and closer to Pesach so that it tastes really good on Pesach. That's also a really good way to get it out the door. Bill's been helping by throwing old boxes away. I saw that. Saw him do that. And I keep saying, crumble it up and give it to the critters, but what can I say? There comes a point at which, you know, and it's hard to tell when matzah's stale because it tastes like the box anyway. But
Yeah.
Not when you cook it up really good.
yeah, and then you can't tell that it's stale either because of everything you've put in it. Yeah, matzah I don't think gets stale because it's usually oil that makes something stale. There's no oil in it. It's not like there's much that can go bad in just wheat and water. And that's how matzah is made. They blend the wheat and the water and bake it within 18 minutes. So it's pretty quick. So I think we've got another question coming through. Maybe, I don't know. So if you do have a question, please give me a call, 772-340-1590. We're talking a little bit about the Seder and just a sidebar about why it cannot be the Last Supper. And I've got Rick on the line. What's your question, Rick?
Hi, Rabbi. How are you today?
Pretty good, thank you. And how about you?
I really enjoy listening to your show. You know, I've been a Christian my whole life, but I have to tell you, I really enjoy listening to some of your traditions and some of the things you do. But you just mentioned something that made me kind of chuckle when you said matzah pizza, because I had an old friend that was a car dealer in Stuart, Florida, for many years. And he was from Massapequa, Long Island. And he said to me, we used to call it matzah pizza because half the population of Massapequa is Jewish and the other half is Italian. So I thought you would like to know that.
That's cute. So Rick said Massapequa is often called matzah pizza. Thank you for that.
That's right. That's what the locals call it, I suppose. Matzah pizza, Long Island. So,
there you go. So I'll talk again real quickly about Tucson. There's a restaurant in Tucson that is an Italian Jewish restaurant. So, you know, we do have fusion. So thank you, Rick. Yeah, great. Matzah pizza. Very good. Jews and Italians. We tend to be together. We tend to be close, probably both Mediterranean, so there's a lot of similarities in foods and things like that. The Mediterranean basin has a lot of very similar foods, like gyro, shawarma. Those are really the same. Just depends on who you're talking to. Mediterranean is, you know, it's a similar climate.
Well, even the lamb too.
Yeah.
I mean, Greek.
Well, lamb grew wild in that neck of the woods, so it was easily domesticated in those areas. And so sheep are one of the critters that easily domesticated.
Mm-hmm.
Sheep and cows, and not so much mountain goats. They kind of have this thing about climbing things.
Amazingly, too. I mean,
yeah. Well,
so if it only takes 18 minutes, is it easy to make matzah?
of course not. You know, well, it depends on what you consider easy. You know, you've got to blend it in that amount of time. And if you've ever blended flour, you know that it's not easy. It takes me a lot longer to make a challah dough than 18 minutes. Yes and no. I mean, you know.
now you have to time yourself next
Well,
time.
you know, I use a bread mixer now, so it's a lot faster.
Mm-hmm.
But it needs for 6 to 8 minutes in the machine, just going. So I guess I could roll it out and bake it really quickly if I had the oven. And that's what they do. They have the oven super hot, and they mix it. They do whatever they do and roll it out, perforate it, and throw it in the oven. It's a very quick process. And in about 3 weeks, they'll be starting to bake the matzah for next year already. Because they start well, like everything else, they start well in advance so they can package it up and ship it out. And since it doesn't spoil, it's not a big deal. What can I say? You know, it's in some ways a sad thing. Streit's, the big factory in Manhattan, just closed. They went to a more modern facility. They weren't going to do it, and finally broke down and did it. Because it's hard to do any kind of factory on multiple floors anymore. People have just learned that elevators and things like that are just a problem if you're going to try to do fast production. Yeah, you need to, the raw material needs to come in one door, go through the factory, and come out the finished goods at the other end. We've learned that over the years. So going up and down floors was the biggest waster of time when I worked at Goodyear, was waiting on elevators. So, yeah, what can I say? So matzah brei, matzah pizza, all those things are good. And to me, it's just not hard. I look forward to it. There's so many foods that I only eat during those 8 days that, yeah, it's kind of fun. And a little more creative. You think about how to do this, how to do that. And I allow myself a variety of different things. So, yeah, we'll take it from there. Lots of fun foods. I know that a menu is being planned by the folks doing the seders, so we'll have a really good seder. You can register if you'd like to come to the seder. Registration's on the website. It's www.eitzchayim.org. And if you click Seder Reservations, click here. It'll take you right. You can register online, or you can print off the piece and mail it in, whichever is your preference. You can pay for the meal with a credit card, or you can use a check or whatever form of negotiable. PayPal, yeah, any of the above, that'll work. And it's not a cheap meal, and part of that's all the ritual. There's just a ton of ritual items that go into it, but you'll have the option of, and you can have more than one. You're not restricted to picking one entree. There'll be beef, there'll be fish, there'll be chicken, there'll be vegan. So lots of things that you can pick from. Last year the vegan was so good that everybody ate it, not just the vegan folk, and that's fine. I make enough so that it works as a side for everybody else, and it's just but it's got all the proteins that a vegan needs.
Now you said I make enough. You
I make the vegan
okay.
piece. Yeah. The rest of the committee is making the brisket and the chicken and the fish.
Have you ever made matzah rolls?
Matzah rolls.
Yeah. They look like a roll. Like a muffin.
Like a dinner roll kind of thing?
Like a dinner roll.
I've seen them. I've not made them. And
my grandmother used to make them, and then my mother used to make them, and I used to take like a dozen to school when I was in college or something, and I'd eat those all week.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just pack a box of matzah with me, and I'll eat that when I'm out and about. You can usually find fresh fruit or vegetables, and you mix that with the matzah, and it's usually quite a tasty meal. Not a problem. The thing that used to be a problem was coffee. Finding, and I'm a pain about wanting a fair trade coffee. Now this isn't fair trade coffee, and I'll admit that I have this almost every week here, and I have a bottle of it in my class. But most of the coffee that I drink, because that's only one a day, and the 2 or 3 other cups are all fair trade. And yeah, what can I say? I have this thing about not wanting, particularly for the holiday, I don't want to use slave products. And I really notice, why is it that a company has some of its products fair trade marked and the other products not? Right? You would think that a company would want all of its products fair trade marked. So it probably means the others really aren't. So, yeah. What can I say? In today's world, it's one of the reasons why chocolate and coffee have gotten so much more expensive. So we've gotten away from some of the slave trade. Slave trade, I'm told by people who actually raise coffee and raise cocoa, is only short-term cheaper. It's not long-term cheaper. But a lot of people only look at the short term and then have more challenges. All right, so we are coming back to the end of this time. We've got just about another 4 or 5 minutes. And you can still give me a call at 772-340-1590. And a thank you to the folks who have called in already. And you are welcome to join us at a Friday night at 7:30, or Saturday morning at 9:30 or 10:30. 9:30 for Torah study and 10:30 for services. The Seder is coming up, and that Seder is on the 19th and the 20th, a Friday night and a Saturday night. Please feel free to join us. And it'll start at 6 o'clock. And no, we won't have Friday night services at the temple that Friday. It'll be a sign up in the door saying, sorry, we're having Seder elsewhere. So we decided to move out of the temple space because it's a little bit cramped. And Stuart's got this mansion.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll be using his rooms for the Seder. It'll be a little more roomy. His house is bigger than mine was in Tucson, so we were crowded in Tucson. We won't be crowded in your house. Or maybe we will. I don't know.
Do you push back all the furniture and put up tables?
Well, right now in my living room,
have a lot of
I don't have any
Okay.
furniture in my living room.
Okay.
That was taken by the last girlfriend.
Oh, no.
That actually had something to do with our looking around and going, this would work, because we didn't have to move furniture. We do have to bring tables in, but we won't have to move his furniture out. Except for the one, and we probably use the one dining room table that's there.
I use the dining room, and
Yeah, it just
you can still use
grow
the
from there.
family room.
So we're going to look at different ways to configure it, and one of these years, in the next day or two, I need to get over there and measure tables in. But yeah, we're getting ready for it. We're down to 2 minutes, so I want to thank everybody, and we'll be moving forward and having some great things. Feel free to give me a call also, or dash me an email. At the temple website, you can send a message to me if there's something you'd like to hear me talk about on Ask a Rabbi, because I am here to answer your questions and talk to the things that matter to you. That's 772-340-1590. Don't know that you're going to get a call much more in today because we've only got like 2 minutes, but maybe you can join us next week. I'll be back again for Ask a Rabbi, and check our website out, check different things out, give us a look, and I'll see you next week. It's Rabbi Shafir Lobb from Congregation Eitz Chayim in Port St. Lucie.